Welcome one and all to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 217. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the second podcast of May 2023. And May has proven to be a pretty busy month, especially for me, also around the world in terms of like news and media and things coming out, but more particularly me, since this is my podcast. I had a pretty active weekend, or weekends more accurately, as one of the major things that happened in my life and for a lot of other very special people in my life was I attended a wedding, which was a amazing experience. I actually haven't been to too many weddings in my lifetime. I think I've only been to about 3, and only 2 of which I'm consciously, actively aware of, and one of which I was working during said wedding. Well, I was still attending and I was still a guest there, but I was doing work there. But this was, I think, the most recent one where I was able to actually enjoy it, participate it, and kind of experience this amazing magical moment with these 2 people who, got wedded. And I honestly couldn't be happier for the people who are now married and now living elsewhere. I'm not going to go into too many details about the actual event and the day because I'm kind of hoping to have said person on the podcast in the very near future. So hopefully you'll get more details in terms of what I particularly did, what they particularly did, and maybe some other people and thoughts and feedbacks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, going back to this month being very active already, I've really been putting in the effort to try and do more in terms of play more games, watch more films, watch more TV, read as well. I buy a lot of books, but I don't actually read them, although some of those books themselves are quite light when it comes to reading. But nonetheless, I managed to go and see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I really enjoyed it. This is honestly, as most people are now saying, one of the best Marvel films to come out in years. It feels like a massive breath of fresh air to actually have a Marvel film actually just be a film and not feel like homework. Like, if you're interested in seeing this film and you haven't seen the previous Guardians of the Galaxy films, I would recommend seeing the first 2, the Christmas special, and I think as long as you've seen the last 2 Avengers film, you should be good. Although a lot of the films unfortunately do tend to just expect and assume that you know everything and you watched every TV show and you know every single minute detail. But I think if you've only just seen the first 2 films, you should be good with this one. You may need to watch, let's say, a YouTube summary catch-up video or whatever to some extent. But I really enjoyed it. It's not perfect. It may technically be the weakest of the 3 films, only coming from a pacing and story narrative, as things do get a bit messy to some extent. Like it does struggle to kind of juggle certain plot points, certain character, let's say, arcs for the most part, and some of the writing, especially more of the comedy side, isn't the best. They kind of do run a few jokes into the ground, and some jokes don't hit as hard or feel as natural as they usually do. And there is a helicopter going over my house at the moment, so if you can hear that, I do apologize. It's just bad timing at the end of the day. But nonetheless, it's a good film. It really focuses and really develops characters that kind of needed it, such as Rocket Raccoon and a few others like Nebula, who kind of takes a little bit more of a lead role in this film without her stealing the, role or thunder from, let's say, Peter Quill, who is our main character, because that is something that the Marvel films have a very bad tendency to do, is to have a film where the lead character is male or has been established as the hero, just to have, female characters kind of put them down and just steal the thunder for them. You can have female characters be badass and help and do amazing things and save the male hero. That's fine, as long as that's not all they're there to do. And that's, how do I phrase this? Yeah, I think let's use a good example of, let's say, Thor. No one really liked the fourth Thor film, and part of the reason was because of the comedy just being too overt, and also the fact that the 2 lead female characters just kind of did everything, and Thor was just a bumbling idiot. I mean, if you want to see a Thor film, that's what you go see. You don't go to see Thor get upstaged by a bunch of people. But there's none of that really in this film. It honestly could have done with an extra... I mean, this film is quite long. It's 2 hours, 30 minutes. They could have very easily shaved 30 minutes off this. I don't know why it's so long. But yeah, I would highly recommend it. I think this is probably one of the last good films that Marvel is ever going to release for a while. So you might as well go see it. And given that this is going to be the last Guardians of the Galaxy film, I'm just going to assume this is the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because there isn't a single other film that I think anyone is actively looking forward to or excited for, because especially given the recent track record with previous films before this, and obviously the next one releasing is The Marvels, which I deliberately did not talk about because I thought that trailer was so bad that it's not worth mentioning at all. We all know that film is going to be bad, and we all know it's going to be we all know it's going to bomb. So there's no real point in me stating the obvious. The other thing I did as well, I know I've talked about this game a couple of times already, but I managed to platinum the Resident Evil 4 remake. I did that literally, just about a day ago. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. It was more time consuming because it kind of requires you to play the game a couple of times. So I've kind of beaten it about 7 times or so. And you kind of have to save up for certain things and do certain things. I think the aiming in that game and the inaccuracy of the guns really made that more difficult than it actually was. The hardest part of the whole, let's say, platinum process was getting the S plus rank on professional mode. And even then, I wouldn't say it's that bad. It's doable, like really doable. I mean, you have to beat it in, I think, 5.5 hours, and I think I did it in just under 5. So it is doable, but I highly recommend it. It's still a good game. It's still one of the best games to come out this year, despite its major flaws. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to. I'm kind of in the middle of a couple of shows as well. One in particular, which I want to mention because I want people to watch it and I want people to know about this, being Unicorn Warriors Eternal, directed by Gendy Tartakovsky, who is one of the best animators in the industry right now. The very first episode of Unicorn Warriors Eternal is actually on YouTube right now for you to watch and to kind of get a taste of what the series is going to be like. It's going to be a small one. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description and the download link so you can watch the first episode and hopefully continue watching it elsewhere wherever you are. I know that in England, the series is actually available to watch on Channel 4 On Demand. So please go watch it there if you want to see it, as opposed to waiting for hopefully a DVD release. But that's pretty much the main crux of it. It's been an interesting couple of days. A lot of things have happened. I know in the time span between podcasts, the not Bethesda game, I forget who is it. Acclaim? I can't remember. The people who made the Dishonored series and Deathloop and some of the other games in that series. I think it's Acclaim. It's AK something. I can't remember what they're called. I'm basically referring to Redfall, being their newest game that's come out in an unfinished, broken mess, which has got people really worried. And obviously people are just completely shitting on this game, and rightfully so. But it's caused a lot of issues because I think the statement that the video game industry is in a dying situation is really becoming more prevalent, with so many games being released in such like poor optimized, broken, unfinished, just uninspired like fashions. Obviously that came out, and then you had the Forspoken, you had like the new Star Wars game, which although maybe a good story game, is just doesn't really work. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be so many other AAA games released this year that just won't work. It's a very depressing situation. Another very depressing situation is the fact that Twitter itself is going to be deleting inactive accounts. I believe spectrum, or the point in which they determine whether a Twitter account is inactive is 30 days. So if you don't sign into your Twitter account for 30 days, they're apparently going to delete it, which I think is a bit ridiculous, especially when you take into account the fact that people may just be simply taking a break from social media, or this could be the Twitter accounts of people who have unfortunately passed away. I don't like the fact that Twitter is actively trying to erase history once again. It bothers me, and it's just another reason why you should probably just start downplaying and limiting your use of Twitter and eventually delete it, because it's not going to be around for much longer. And yeah, it's just egregious. I really don't like it. That's why I don't really have one anymore. But let's actually move on to news stories and topics, which we only have 3 because, to be honest, there was only 3 things I thought were worth talking about. And the first 2 trailers, which we're going to talk about, we're actually going to have some fun comparing the 2 because they are of very similar styles, and I guess they kind of fall into the same genre, which I guess is the shark genre or big shark genre, monster shark genre. I don't know, but I know there is an audience for this. But the first trailer we have is going to be for Black Demon, which is somewhat of an interesting film because it feels like a bit more of a bigger budget compared to some of these low rank, find them for £5 at your local Sainsbury's kind of films. And yeah, like they're leaning very heavily on the family element, which is fine for this trailer. As you see, like the guy and his like kids, and they're going to this like oil rig to. I honestly forget the general plot of it. It's not really important compared to the fact that there's a big shark. That's the main crux of it. It's not something. It's something you don't usually see in these films. It's either just like researchers who just kind of go there to explore something going on, or it's just some people with a boat, or the family dynamic itself is like the worst part, where you get like, I don't know, the stroppy teenager who's been dragged along, an annoying child who will obviously fall in the water and they have to save, that kind of stuff. But here, like, I don't know, it's not over the top. It's sappy, but it's not like, oh, he's a family man, that kind of stuff. And I know the film is trying to like be foreboding with scenes of like empty areas and the whole like town, people knowing what's going on. But like, why is anyone within the area of this ocean scared of a shark? Because they're on land. Like, I don't really get that mechanic. I can understand if this was like a demon that snatches children, but a big shark is not going to do much on land. Yes, it's going to drive tourism away. Yes, it's going to scare people away, but it's not going to affect you. You could stay on, you could literally stay like 6 feet away from the sea and you'd still be fine. I didn't really get that mechanic for the most part. And it was really weird. This is where like some of the dumb kind of elements of this film, and where they kind of haven't really thought about how that thematically works within a story and a narrative. Like, you're going to an oil rig. Like, why are you sticking your hand in the water and acting surprised when it's covered in oil or dirt? Like, there's spelling it out for the audience, and then there's treating the audience like idiots. Like, it's a bit insulting. You don't need a child to like dip her hand in the water to go, oh my god, it's oil. Where's this oil coming from? Oil was polluting the ocean. Like, oil does not look like that, especially near an oil rig. It is a thicker liquid, yes, but it's not in a mass. If you were to dip your hand into water where there is oil, it wouldn't be completely black. You would have some residue on you, but it would not be black, because oil moves compared to water, in a somewhat of a liquidy, solid kind of mass, if that makes sense. I'm pretty sure there's probably videos you can find online of how like oil looks, but it's not just a black puddle within water, or the ocean itself is completely black. That's honestly really stupid, and that really bothered me, because you could have done that scene so much better, because it kind of goes into this, it's very preachy environmental kind of themes, which we'll get to in a second. But there are some positives, the things I do actually like within this trailer, like the scene of the guy getting crushed and like dragged down in that it's like an oxygen chamber or a diving chamber. Like, that's a pretty cool concept. Like, it's legitimately scary because he's basically dead. Like, there's no saving him, and it's a pretty horrible way to go, because the moment, because you're either going to get crushed or dragged down to the ocean and crushed and killed, or the shark is just going to eat you. It's bleak, but it's kind of cool to some extent. But I kind of hate that they ruined that in the trailer. I guess as long as this film doesn't get too preachy with its environmentalist theme and kind of stays away from outdated stereotypes I know that's taking place. I can't remember if they say where it is, but it feels like maybe somewhere in Mexico, Spain, somewhere like that. It could be a fun film. It does have a lot of potential, because it is a somewhat goofy premise, and it kind of needs to be a little goofier to some extent. But there are, like once I said, those really silly things that are bothering me. And like, how many times do you think, or do you bet, that someone or one of their questionably intelligent children are going to fall into the water? You could probably play a drinking game about this to this film, and you'd have a good time that leads to the hospital, because it feels like one of those. And the shot at the end of the trailer, looked awful. Like when the shark jumps out of the ocean and just eats a shark, which I'm sure that's a film with sharks eating sharks. When it jumps out and eats the boat, like, is that meant to be comedically bad? Because the CGI in this trailer at the moment looks awful, and the perspective is just weird. Like, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. I really didn't get it. But that's the first of two shark films we have. Not to be outdone, we then have Meg 2, The Trenches, which is the sequel to The Meg. For some reason, they dropped the. Don't get it. Really weird, once again, this sort of like rivalry of, oh, you're dropping a trailer very similar to ours, well, we gotta drop this trailer to get the attention away from you and put it on us. Like, I really don't get it. Yes, that has happened before in the past. It's not exclusive to this year, but it feels very more rampant this year than ever before for whatever reason. I guess it's because Hollywood is just that desperate, because apparently last year was one of Hollywood's worst performing financial years in history. But yeah, so we got Meg 2, The Trenches, which I still think is such a dumb name. It doesn't work for me. Apparently enough people were tricked into seeing this film to warrant a sequel. And tonally, this film is like all over the place. Like, you know, it starts out and it's kind of like in prehistoric times, and it kind of has like the scene where it's like the T-Rex and he's like, oh, I'm the best or whatever, and then, oh snap, like the badass T-Rex gets killed by an even bigger, badder monster. It's like, so played out. Like, they're trying way too hard to be cool and possibly edgy. But Jurassic Park 3, the film that they are unintentionally ripping off while trying to rip off so many other things, which I'll get to again, did exactly the same thing. That was the whole selling point of Jurassic Park 3, was they had this new, I think before the film actually came out, it was discovered by scientists that there was a dinosaur that was bigger and tougher and scarier than the T-Rex. And that film kind of ran with the whole idea. And I think one of the first scenes of a dinosaur fight is that new dinosaur just killing a T-Rex. And I think the general audience response to that was just like, oh, that dinosaur isn't as cool as a T-Rex. We don't like this thing. It was kind of dumb for the most part. And yeah, like, this is a really unoriginal film in so many ways, from the point of where it's like shot, you know, just the whole fact that Jason Statham is, you know, big tough guy doing his pull-ups, and then it's like, Jason, we need you back, you know, and, you know, the fact that there are so many elements that they've clearly taken from and verging on ripping off. Like, you got elements of Pacific Rim with them going underwater, wearing those suits with the lights that to kind of illuminate their face with color. You've got Alien, obviously, because of the suits and kind of like slowly walking in an alien place. There are a lot of references, or I guess you can make a lot of comparisons to space and water because of the way you move, and it being one of the last frontiers not necessarily explored by man. Also the film Underwater, which was a 20th Century Fox film that directly ripped off Alien, and was just completely shit. Obviously, Jurassic Park, they really just want to kind of take advantage of and kind of capitalize on the success of the Jurassic World films for the most part. King Kong, obviously, because, well, more accurately, Peter Jackson's King Kong, because you see like leech creatures and it's a group of characters kind of fighting off these monsters, both underwater and later on in the theme park, water park kind of place. And Piranha, both the original 70s version and the slightly newer one, which was dubbed 3D, in the way that when people are getting attacked by these creatures, it's very kind of played for laughs to some extent. Like, I know there was one shot which I thought was quite funny, where there's some kind of octopus creature and it's like tentacles just wiggling all over the place in the middle of like this small little pond and everyone's running away. I got a chuckle out of that. That was funny because it's very silly. And Jaws, of course, like every single one of these films just ripping off Jaws because it's the one that did it the best. And if you haven't seen Jaws, please watch it. It's fantastic. You'll be surprised just how good that film is and how it holds up for the most part. But the CGI is very cartoony at the moment. Like, it doesn't look great. Underwater in those darker areas, I think it looked all right. But when you get to land and you get to so many other silly scenes, like, we're going to get to some, like, yeah, there's it's such a confusing film to talk about because it's trying to do and be too much at the same time, which is why I alluded to the fact of it having a very messy tone. Like, oh no, there's more monsters this time. It's like, do we really need that? Do we really need to up the ante to that extent? And I do like the attempt to add colour to the underwater scenes and having the characters fighting or be attacked underwater. I think that's an interesting concept. I do like that. That's something fresh that I don't think I've ever seen or, I was about to say heard of, but it's film. Yeah, that's a cool concept. How is that going to work? How is that going to play out? That's pretty cool, being ambushed underwater. How are they going to get out of this situation? That's great. And really, you have a scene where Jason Statham is kicking a shark. Like, this shark comes up from the dock as if it's like Sonic Adventure, where the orca attacks him. And, you're trying to take yourself seriously, and you're trying to go down like this fast series route, but that seems really stupid. Like, he actually kicks it as if it's going to do anything. That thing is like, 16 times your size. A shark isn't going to go, oh, snap, he kicked me, I best not mess with this guy. No, it's ridiculous. And the scene where the lady is, I guess they're in the underwater base, and, she's like on her phone and she's like, oh, tap on the glass, oh, it's the best, the greatest glass of all time, no megalodon can get in here. And then she just gets eaten by the shark, which, is a, oh, haha, funny, dumb, entitled millennial character got eaten. Yeah, no water spills in after the shark bursts through the glass and eats her. Like, I hope they fix that for the film's final release. But yeah, I've watched it and I've frame by frame watched it. Go watch that trailer and watch that scene. No water, not a single drop of water spills through. The shark just perfectly breaks the glass and also somehow stops any water from coming in because his head completely covers the hole where water would come in. It's a very confusing scene. Like, it's questionably bad for the most part. And yeah, like, also it's just ripping off like Deep Blue Sea from 1999, which anyone who knows anything about that film will knows what scene I'm talking about. The scene at the beach or the water park, they're very Sharknado territory, which is essentially a parody of these shark films, although I would say Sharknado is way better than most of these films because it kind of just rolls with the stupidity of it all. I think Sharknado is a good film, although it is one of those intentionally bad films. I think they've made about 8 of those now. But it's perfectly fine for them to go down this, like, wink wink route, but in order for it to work, it needs balance, and I'm not really feeling sense of balance. Like, it flip-flops way too much between needing to be or wanting to be taken seriously and going for this, haha, isn't the concept so, like, silly and dumb. It's not working for me and it's not gelling, and I honestly feel like this film isn't going to succeed in that front because I think they themselves don't know how to market this film and how to do this film. Because, I mean, I know the first film didn't take itself that seriously, but it took itself way more seriously than this one. So I'd imagine for anyone who legitimately enjoyed the first film may be disappointed by the fact that it's all jokes and, ha-ha in the second one. But who knows? Of the two films, I would prefer Black Demon because it seems to be coming from a more genuine place. And I do wonder what the actual inception of these films is. Like, are these two studios actively trying to go after which I would imagine, a very niche audience of people who love these shark monster films, in order to, maximize profit? Are they hoping to, make an extra buck? It's very confusing, and I don't really understand why, because this genre isn't exactly the biggest thing ever. Yeah, big monster films do make a lot of money, but not as much as Marvel films, and I don't see any of these, let's say, monster films being able to set up a cinematic universe. They tried to do that with the god-awful King Kong and Godzilla films, but that's going to inevitably fail simply because America can't keep the rights to Godzilla. It's eventually going to go back to Japan/Toho. So it's a very confusing and weird situation for the most parts. But yeah, talking about sharks for way too long. Let's kind of come away from sharks, kind of. And let's talk about Dune Part Two. I kind of forgot they were doing another Dune film or a continuation from the previous one. But yeah, we've got another trailer for a film that a lot of people really, really loved, and I'm really happy that they did. And just like the first part, this looks amazing. As director Denis, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his second name because I know I'm going to mess it up, so I'm just going to call him Denis V. He continues to push and kind of like elevate the sci-fi genre in the right direction, as I'm really happy that fans have obviously enjoyed this film and are getting something that is very faithful and very respectful to the original stories, which is super cool. And I really hope that this film continues that trend for the most part. I mean, it's interesting. Visually, it is fantastic. The costume designs, are on point for the most part, I think. The sort of like androgynous characters remind me a lot of the engineers from Prometheus, which is fine, but visually they look really cool and kind of creepy. I don't really know what their deal is. My knowledge of Dune is very limited to the original David Lynch directed film, and I know a few things about some of the later books that I don't know if we'll ever make it into films. I don't know if they're going to do a part 3, 4, 5, and 6, but yeah, I wouldn't want to bump into them on down a dark alley for the most part, because they look creepy as hell. And I really like how they've presented the worm riding scene as this like tense, exciting moment where we're following like Paul's journey as he achieves this epic feat. It's really cool. It's paced really well. There's actual moments where he's, it feels like a struggle just to get to it, running away from it, staying on it. It looks great. It's a very iconic scene, more accurately in the film, because I think more people have seen the film as opposed to read the books. And it's just really cool. It's really cool. And also as well, where the first film, the first part, I should say more accurately, looked and felt like cold, this one has a warmer and almost like positive, somewhat yet bleaker color palette, with the desert now kind of being a bit more reminiscent of like a scorching sun, and other moments where it isn't as dull looking in the desert areas, kind of to give that element of hope with Paul and other characters' journeys. But then when you've got these other characters trying to bring Paul down, bring the world down, the color kind of almost devolves back into black and white. Even with those androgynous looking creatures, it is almost black and white, which I think is really cool for the most part. It's what you call, cinematic or visual storytelling, and I think that's going to go really far in terms of helping people who maybe don't necessarily know what's going on kind of understand what the tone and the moment or vibe is for that matter, or for that moment in time. I'm interested and slightly worried about how this film is going to juggle all these subplots and characters. Like, I don't know who necessarily is a major character and all that, and who gets more of a bigger role and who doesn't for the most part. But it looks like there are a lot of stakes in this film, and they seem quite high. And we have lots of characters. It's not just Paul's journey anymore. It's going to be a long film, no matter how you look at it. And hopefully it won't come across as such, because there is nothing worse than watching a film that feels long. So I am very interested. I think Denis can do it. He is an extremely capable director. I mean, obviously he's done the previous ones. He's done the Blade Runner. He's done Arrival. I have faith in him. I'm not necessarily, that's hence why I say slightly worried, because he could, but then again, he has nothing to do with like the Marvel films, which are like, they feel like the longest films of all time. So I'm very hopeful. I need to catch up and maybe rewatch the original film again, and probably watch the newer one, or part 1 as we want to call it. So yeah, I'm very interested in this film. I hope it does well. I know it comes out in November, so it's quite a while away, but I'm pretty sure I'll watch the first film before then. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast for the moment. It was a short one, but there just really wasn't that much to talk about, honestly. But we do have some interesting things to kind of quickly discuss, and that is going to be the video of the episode, which is going to be Daft Punk with Infinity Repeating, featuring Julian Casablancas. This is kind of being dubbed as the last Daft Punk song, as it is going to be released with the 10th anniversary release of their last album being Random Access Memories. Now, this song was a demo and originally recorded back in 2013, and hasn't really seen the light of day since today, as they've just decided to release it, which I think is absolutely pretty cool. And the music video itself and the song itself, I think, is honestly beautiful. I think it's a fantastic song. If this is going to be their last song, which I don't think it will be, it's a fantastic and very interesting send-off that kind of summarizes a lot of themes and a lot of ideas visually and sonically, narratively, about Daft Punk in terms of like the future and that. And I think there has been a lot of like worry in terms of the future in technology, more accurately with AI, the fear that it's going to take over, replace people, more accurately with the writer strike, which I will talk about that another time. It is interesting because one of the whole ideas with Daft Punk was more that the future or the robots are not necessarily someone to be feared. They are going to be the future, but they are more or less our friends. They are someone who we're going to be with. And this music video kind of delves into some of those ideas and kind of really visualizes them. And the amount of people who worked on this music video, just click on the description and you'll see a very long list of people without spoiling the actual video if you haven't actually seen it. But go watch that. Go re-listen to Random Access Memories. Go listen to Daft Punk if you've never listened to them. One of the best artists of all time. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be it. Yeah, I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.